Welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to do a new owner's review of this bike, my fairly new bike. Only had it about 3 months now, and this is the BMW R1250GS. But first off, my apologies that it's been a while since I posted a video. I've been very busy with other things. Obviously we're still in lockdown in the UK, so I'm limited to essential journeys. And some other stuff going on in my life that has just distracted me away from the channel for a while, but I thought I'd take the opportunity today on one of those essential journeys I should add to post a video that I've been meaning to do for a bit, but it's probably just about the right time to do this video. I've had this bike now for 3 months, got it in December, it's early March now. It had 700 miles on it when I got it. The odometer's on 2,687 miles, so I'm pretty much on the cusp of 2,000 miles on this bike, and I thought I'd share my thoughts with you, give you a bit more of a detailed review of the bike. I'll let you know how I'm getting on with it. So what about the spec of this bike? Well, this is a 2020 BMW R1250GS TE spec. Now it's in this sort of black and grey and gold livery, which is quite nice. TE spec brings pretty much all the bells and whistles with it, really. So we've got cruise control, we've got a number of different riding modes, we've got rain, we've got road, we've got Dynamic Pro, and we've got Enduro Pro riding modes, brings all that with it. It's got electronically adjustable suspension, so I can adjust both the damping and the preload on the suspension from the switches on the handlebars. Heated grips. It's got BMW's, I think they call it Gear Shift Assist Pro. It's essentially their quick shifter, which means you can change up and down the box without using the clutch. And I'll give you my thoughts on that in a little while as well. And I've added a few bits and pieces to the bike as well. I've put some crash bars around the engine because it's a boxer engine. It sort of sticks out quite away from the side of the bike. Of course, that's the first thing that's going to hit the ground if you fall off. And yes, I have already fallen off it. At 0 miles an hour on the Hard Knot Pass on Christmas Eve, I decided to go and have a ride over the Lakeland passes. It was a lovely day, and then I encountered some sheet ice and didn't have the off-road type skills to deal with it, so yeah, I fell off. But they did a cracking job of protecting the cylinder heads and the engine from any damage. I've added the top box, a nice good size Givi Adventure top box. Plenty of space in that top box, you fit 2 helmets in there easily. And I fitted this little gizmo here as well to the sat-nav holder. I have got a BMW sat-nav, and to be honest it's pants. So I got this, and I can fit my phone in this, and I can actually charge my phone from the sat-nav itself. So who are my little tank bag here? I'll show you something that I take with me everywhere that I go. And this is my Swiss Army knife. To be exact, it's my Victorinox Swiss Champ. And I've had this pen knife well over 30 years. I bought it back when I was back in my late teens on a skiing holiday in Switzerland. And you know, tools come and go. I've got a garage full of tools at the moment, but if there's one tool that I use every single day for something, it's this. So whatever little job, I mean, you can't take an engine out with this, but whatever little job you want to do, you know, it's got, obviously it's got the knives, it's got the Phillips head screwdriver, a magnifying glass, tin openers, got a little thing there for getting nuts out of monkey's teeth. It's got pretty much everything you could need for any daily jobs, and I always have it with me when I'm out doing these videos, because the screwdriver is perfect for, you know, tightening up the screws nice and tight on the GoPros and things like that. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that I've sort of come to the conclusion that the GS is effectively the Swiss Army knife of motorcycles. I'll set off and I'll explain why. Motorcycling is one of those hobbies where you meet quite a lot of people who've got more than one bike. You know, you don't need a massive amount of room to store a motorbike. It's not like having a collection of different cars. So my mate Andy, for instance, has got a little sports bike in his garage. He's got a little Honda C90. He's got a trail bike. So whatever type of riding he fancies doing, he'll pick the bike for the job. But I don't have multiple motorbikes, I have just the one. And it's a tool for me, really. It's something I use for my commute to work. I use it for touring. I like to go away on the bike once or twice a year. I like to go out for a bit of a blast on a Sunday morning. And of course I do the IAM stuff, I do the examining for the IAM, I do training on this bike. So I don't have the luxury of picking the right bike for each of those particular jobs. I get one bike and it has to do everything. So effectively, my bike has to be a Swiss Army bike. So each of those jobs that I want the bike to do, I think the GS fills that criteria really nicely. I'm not saying it's perfect for every one of those jobs. If you're trying to be a jack of all trades, you'll not master them all. But I think this bike comes as close as it's possible to being good at everything that you need a bike for. So while we're up on this moorland road, let's just talk about what the bike's like to ride. You know, if you're out for a bit of a blast on a Sunday morning. I have to say, the first thing you notice when you put your leg over the bike and you ride it for the first time, even at very slow speeds, is it looks a real lump of a bike when you walk up to it. And it is, it's heavy, about 260 kilograms, something like that. It's a big heavy bike, so those of you that ride sports bikes will just roll your eyes when you hit the weight of the bike. But as soon as you get moving, even at 1 or 2 miles an hour, those low manoeuvring speeds, the bike suddenly feels very light and manoeuvrable, and it is. Don't forget, BMW have been making this bike for 40 years. It's a bit like the Porsche 911. Never really significantly redesigned it, they just changed it a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit more. So you end up with this. And that low speed ability, of course, means that manoeuvring around town, commuting especially, it's great. Because combined with that ease of manoeuvrability, the bike is really, really very comfortable indeed. There's a little bit of adjustability in the seat, and it's probably a bit tall for some people, but you know, BMW do a lowered seat version. And they do a lowered suspension version as well. This is the standard version, and I have the seat on its highest setting. I'm 6 foot tall, a fairly short leg for a 6-footer, but actually it fits me really nicely. You can adjust the seat down a little bit on the standard bike. So once you're on it, it's a nice upright riding position. You've got a cracking view, and it's comfortable. You can sit in this riding position all day long. So that combination of the comfortable riding position, the good view, and really it's a very nice light handling bike at low speeds. And then the next thing you notice is the engine. Now, I've ridden quite a few R-engined BMWs, GSs, RTs, that kind of stuff, with the old 1200 engine, and it's a good engine. And I think the thing you notice for the first time you ride one of those bikes is the low down torquey nature of the engine. And this bike has, I think, 105 pounds-foot of torque, which again, if you relate it to the weight of the engine, it's only the weight of the bike, it's only 260 kilograms. That torque is what really makes this bike so grunty at low revs, and it really does pull very, very strong at low revs. It requires a very different riding technique to my previous bike, the S1000XR, which was revvy, much more like a sports bike, and you had to rev the nuts off it to get the performance out of it. This bike, you can actually adopt a lazier riding style, change up at lower revs, take advantage of that real clout, but at the same time, here's the thing to note with this engine now, this is the 1250. Yeah, the thing to remember with the 1250 engine is that this now has what BMW have christened shift cam technology, which actually isn't that new. I'm surprised they market it as though it's some terrific new invention. What's occurring here? We've seen it in cars and other vehicles before. Honda have had VTEC for years and years, and I think they've had VTEC on the VFR 800 as well. So it isn't essentially a new thing to bikes, but it is new to this engine, and it's I think it's really made a significant difference to this engine, because whereas the older engines sort of run out of puff once you get a bit higher in the rev range, this bike revs, and the idea is that it shifts from one cam profile to another cam profile at 5,000 revs. Now in the older VTEC engine Hondas and things like that I've driven, and I used to have an M3 that had Vanos, which was the same thing, you'd notice that point at which the cams changed profile. It was like a step up in performance. I think the surprising thing about this bike is that you don't notice that step up in performance. What happens is the engine just revs really nice and freely all the way around to the red line, and it keeps on delivering that power much higher up the rev range. So I don't think you'd ever ride a 1200 GS and think, oh, it's a bit slow this. They're not. But the nature of the power delivery on this thing is significantly different. It really does rev smoothly right round to the rev line. It doesn't feel like it's running out of puff as you get higher up the revs. And that means that, you know, if you're out for a bit of a blast on it, you can rev it a bit more, you can hold the lower gears a bit longer. Now let's be clear, it's not a sports bike by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, so if you want to get your knee down and you want to go scratching down back lanes and doing track days and things like this, it's probably not the bike for you. But if you've only got one bike and you need it to do lots of things, and one of those is having a blast on a Sunday morning, I've no complaints about the bike's performance. 136 brake horsepower, 105 pounds-foot of torque. It'll out accelerate most really, really fast cars, and handling wise it is I think it's a cracking handling bike, this, especially with the adjustability that you've got on the suspension. So with this button here on the move, I can adjust the damping between road and dynamic, and actually it really does feel noticeably different between those two settings. Road, I've got it in road at the moment because look at the state of the road. You know, you want a bit of compliance in the damping, but when you're on something a bit smoother and you're moving the bike along nice and quickly, you want it a bit more responsive to your inputs, put it in dynamic, it's definitely firmer. You can really feel the damping firming up, but it actually makes the bike really quite responsive to your inputs. So coming back to the analogy of a Swiss Army knife, one of the things you want to do is have a bit of a blast every now and again. This bike is well up for it, and you won't be disappointed with the performance. So it's okay on the commute, a little bit wide when it comes to filtering. Obviously it's an adventure style bike, it's got the wide handlebars, but it's no wider than the mirrors and the end of the bars. The only issue I have with filtering is past vans, like this Transit and this Luton van up here. If you look at the height of the mirrors, they tend to be exactly the same height as the bike's mirrors. Other than that, I have no issues filtering on this on my commute to work. It's a great commuter, comfortable. Of course, it's got the heated grips. Keep you warm on a cold morning. And the luggage capacity of that box that I've put on it is really good. I can carry everything I need to do my job. So what about touring? What's it like as a touring bike? Well, I went away last September with Andy on the previous bike. We went up to the Outer Hebrides. Stay there, fella. That was on the XR, which was great. I haven't been away on this bike yet, obviously, because we're in lockdown, but I'm sure at some point later on this year, get the opportunity, if things keep going in the right direction, I'll get away on it and have a bit of a break. So like I said, luggage capacity is great. You can fit panniers. I'm not a huge fan of panniers, to be honest, but can certainly get the top box, get my big tank bag on, and get a roll bag on the back, and take everything I'd need for a couple of weeks away on this bike. Comfort wise, when you're on the motorway, you could sit on this bike all day long. It's got good wind protection. Like I said before, I'm a bit of a funny shape, so I'm 6 foot tall, but I've only got a 30-inch inside leg, so I've got a long body and short legs, and the issue with having a long body is it always pops your head a little bit higher up above the screen than you'd prefer. This screen is adjustable with this knob here, but you can see it's on the highest setting, and I still get a little bit of wind noise towards the top of the helmet. I notice some people get a little deflector that sits on the top of the screen. Maybe I'll invest in one of those at some point, but actually I just don't like the look of them. I think the bike looks a bit cleaner without that deflector clipped onto the top of the screen, but maybe I'll give one a go. The wind noise isn't that bad, and actually the rest of me is well protected from the wind. My legs down here, obviously they're behind the cylinders, they're behind this wider part of the tank, and we've got the wind deflectors on the front here. So you are pretty well protected from the elements, to be honest. It's not an RT, and I borrowed an RT for a week while my XR was in having one of its numerous repairs. And the RT was, I mean, you really were protected from the wind in that, and you had an electric adjustment on the screen, and it was like a bubble of calm behind that screen and the full fairing. It's not quite to that extent, but it's 90% of it. And again, if you want a Swiss Army bike, it's got to be good at everything. You won't want one of these with a full fairing on it, you'd want it as it is. And what about off-road? Well, I suppose that's the one thing I can't really comment on at the moment. I don't ride off-road. I've never learnt to ride off-road, but I do intend to do that a little bit later on this year. So I'm going to book onto the BMW's off-road course in Wales. We're going to have a couple of days there doing their level 1 course, and of course I will video that and put it all on YouTube for you, and I'll be able to better comment about this bike's off-road abilities then. But you know, it's sold as an adventure tourer, it's sold as a bike that's well capable of going off-road. It's no trials bike, it's just too heavy, and it's no trail bike either. But you know, long way around, all that kind of stuff, this bike is certainly designed to cope with pretty much any kind of road surface, rough, gravel, rocks, ice and snow, even if you've got the right tyres. It would require a change of tyres. I'm going to carry on running this bike on road tyres, but it is you know, it is very capable off-road. It's just the weight that goes against it really for that, but it's very capable off-road, and I'll share my thoughts on that with you later on in the year. So what about thoughts about some of the specific elements of this bike? The first thing that you notice when you get on one of these is this TFT screen, and it really does give you loads of information, and you can scroll down The thing will connect to your phone, it'll connect to your Bluetooth in your helmet. You can play music through it. It has a form of navigation on it as well. You have to have your phone with you. It links from the app on your phone. It doesn't give you map directions, but it does give you turn-by-turn directions on the screen if you've got that switched on, which I find really useful. It's much better than faffing about with the sat-nav up here, especially that dreadful BMW sat-nav that I wasted 500 quid on. The different rider modes, you've got a rain mode and a road mode. Rain mode softens the throttle response down. It gives you early intervention of the stability control systems and traction control and wheelie control and things like that. Road just gives the bike a slightly sharper throttle response but keeps all those early interventions of the systems. And then once you've fitted the chip, there's a little chip comes with the bike that gives you more options. In TE spec you can also choose Dynamic Pro or Enduro Pro. In both of those modes, I think the Pro element means that you can set different parameters yourselves. It's a bit like the M1 and the M2 buttons in my BMW M2. You can pre-select the settings that you prefer for different riding modes. You can really sharpen up the throttle response, and it opens up a valve in the exhaust. And I think that brings us to a little point that you've probably noticed, and that is that the engine light's currently on the bike. Now don't worry, I've spoken to BMW, it's okay to carry on using it. It's going in to get checked early next week. The engine light is on because the valve in the exhaust is stuck open, so you might notice at lower speeds it sounds quite roarty. Normally in road the valve in the exhaust will be shut and it'll have a quieter exhaust note, but it's stuck open. So remember all the problems I had with that S1000XR, and I was hoping this would be a paragon of reliability. It would appear that isn't the case at the moment. It only sounds like a minor issue. It's going to get sorted under warranty, probably in a half-hour visit to the dealers, but I'm just really praying and hoping that isn't a sign of things to come with this bike. Because above everything else, I need to rely on this bike. I'm going to be using it pretty much every day as we get into the year and lockdown gets released. What else can I tell you about it? Brakes are superb. Good sized discs on the front. And actually the back brake is significantly better than it was on the XR as well. So if I give them a good squeeze now, oh, the bike really pulls up nicely on those brakes. Handling in the dry like this, what I'll do is I'll just put the dampers into dynamic road. And it really sharpens up the response of the bike. So the next thing I want to talk about is BMW's Gear Shift Assist Pro. That's their quick shifter. Now I had that fitted on the XR. And I loved it, and pretty much every gear change was clutchless, except for first to second and second to first, because when you're going through neutral, the bike quite often would miss and just click into neutral, and if you're accelerating away from the lights you get a big fistful of revs rather than an engaged gear. So I always used to clutch it first to second, and then I would effectively use the quick shifter at all other times. On this bike it's not as good, although I am getting to know it a little bit better, and I think as the bike gets running it's getting much better. What I find is the quick shifter on this bike works better when you're really pressing on and the revs are a bit higher, but at lower speeds I'm sticking with the clutch. So now, if we open the bike up, click it up, it's smooth, snicky, rev matches perfectly, it's really nice. But those lower speeds, I tend to clutch it through. Overtaking performance on this bike is good, and the nice thing is you don't have to click it down too many gears. I'm going to leave it in third here. Already seen that the opportunity's on. Third gives you more than ample acceleration, even for something doing this sort of speed, 20 miles an hour. We'll find that third gear is more than enough to get the overtaking nice and smartly. Now, as the miles have increased on the bike, like I say, I've done 2,000 miles in it now. It only had 700 miles on it when I bought it. That quick shifter has definitely started to improve. So here, down a couple of gears without using the clutch, feels smooth and controlled. Like I say, when you're pressing on, it works really nicely. Definitely not as good as it is on the XR, which I presume is the same system as on the RR. And I suspect that that's probably down to the nature of the engine and the power delivery rather than any fault in the system itself. This has a big old gearbox shaft drive on the back of the bike. And I suppose it's worth mentioning that shaft drive as well. For somebody who uses the bike pretty much every day, one thing you do end up faffing around with a lot is the chain. You know, you need to make sure it's well oiled, you need to check the tension every couple of weeks, you need to change it fairly regularly. I had 2 chains and sprockets on that XR. Pretty much lost all that worry with this bike, with being shaft drive. Nice encased shaft drive. Definitely one less thing to faff about with on the bike. So that's pretty much my review of this, the 2020 R1250GS. I think my description of it as a Swiss Army bike is fair. Tell me if you disagree, stick it in the comments below if you disagree. It does every one of those different elements that I want a bike to do. It isn't the best at any of them, but it's pretty good at all of them. And when you've only got one bike, that's what you need. But I'll let you into a bit of news that I've got coming. I am getting another motorbike. I'm not going to tell you any more about it until it arrives. I'll make a video about it. But I'm having another motorbike delivered on Tuesday. It's not a new motorbike by any stretch of the imagination, but I hope it's something you'll find interesting. There's a nice story behind it as well. I hope you enjoy the story behind it. But for now, that's it for this video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know if you agree or disagree. If you've got one of these bikes, tell me what you think about it. Any questions or anything like that, stick them in the comments below. If you haven't already, can I ask you to subscribe to the channel as well, please? It helps the channel along. And I do fully intend to go back to uploading videos on a much more regular basis. If you watch the next video I'm going to upload, you'll understand why I've had some issues. Get a bit more personal in that video. And don't forget to go and have a look at the website as well, reglocal.com. Loads more information there about advanced driving and riding. Information there about how you can get a day's driver or rider coaching with me if you fancy a drive out or a ride out. Get some tips to improve. Drop me an email and we'll sort something out. Again, COVID permitting, but I think we're getting to the end of the restrictions. So hopefully we can start doing that again very soon. But for now, thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time.